By 2008, TNA was finally gathering momentum. The company had a unique product, showcasing a six-sided ring, the high-flying X Division, and talents like AJ Styles and Samoa Joe, who were becoming household names among fans. TNA had a seriously deep roster of former WWE superstars, and their fan base was growing worldwide. Everything seemed to be in place for a breakthrough. Then, they signed Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. Just 4 years later, these men would leave the company in a far worse state than when they arrived. TNA Wrestling was founded in 2002 by Jeff and Jerry Jarrett to fill the void left by the closure of WCW and ECW. The unique selling point of this new promotion was a weekly pay-per-view model. Despite a talented roster, they soon started to struggle. It proved difficult for them to build an audience when fans had to pay $9.99 each week to keep up with the show. Production quality issues made the shows look less polished compared to WWE, and fans could just watch Raw and SmackDown for free each week. Everyone expected the company to go out of business until Panda Energy stepped in. Panda purchased 72% of the company, turning it into a family business with Dixie Carter running things backstage. With Panda's support, TNA moved away from the weekly pay-per-view model and secured a show on Spike TV in 2005. They signed major former WWE superstars and started touring internationally. However, things were far from perfect. Dixie Carter was proving to be a poor leader backstage. She lacked experience running a wrestling business, struggled to book shows effectively, and found it difficult to control her staff. The turmoil behind the scenes began to affect the on-screen product. Pay-per-views were poorly promoted, matches often featured screwy finishes, and fans were left unsatisfied despite TNA turning a small profit. Something had to be done, and Dixie thought signing Hulk Hogan was the solution. Hogan's star power was expected to elevate the brand and attract more fans. The deal on the table was fantastic for Hogan too. He would be paid $35,000 per appearance. According to Eric Bischoff, he negotiated that contract on Hogan's behalf. After striking such a deal, it's easy to see why Hogan wanted Bischoff by his side in TNA. Initially, Dixie had no interest in bringing Bischoff in, but Hogan insisted. He sat Dixie down and explained that Bischoff was the visionary behind WCW's turnaround in the mid-1990s. Hogan claimed that with his star power and Bischoff's creative vision, they could put WWE out of business. On October 27, 2009, during a press conference at Madison Square Garden, Hulk Hogan announced that he and Eric Bischoff had signed with TNA. During the presentation, Dixie Carter said, "Our goal is to become the world's biggest professional wrestling company. Hulk defines professional wrestling, and we look forward to partnering with him in a variety of ways as we continue to grow TNA globally." Bischoff's influence as an executive producer was felt immediately. He argued that the six-sided ring was just a gimmick that made TNA look like a joke. He claimed that channel-flipping viewers wouldn't recognize it as a wrestling show unless it had a four-sided ring. Many fans were outraged by this decision. To them, the six-sided ring was one of the things that made TNA unique. But bigger changes were coming. Bischoff had nearly beaten WWE in the 1990s during the Monday Night Wars, but Vince McMahon ultimately won, leading to WCW's closure. Now, Bischoff saw an opportunity for revenge. Bischoff, Hogan, and Dixie Carter convinced Spike TV executives to give TNA a live Monday night show to compete directly with WWE Raw. Fans were baffled. How could two of wrestling's brightest minds and Dixie Carter come up with such a risky plan? Yet Spike TV agreed to a special live episode of Impact on Monday, January 4th, 2010, which would mark Hogan's on-screen debut. Promotion for the event was massive, with TNA spending a fortune on advertising. But even before Hogan stepped into the Impact Zone, signs of trouble emerged. When the show aired, Mike Tenay and Taz introduced a new broadcast partner, Bubba the Love Sponge. Bubba, a shock jock radio DJ and longtime friend of Hogan, had been brought onto TNA's payroll by Hogan. Fans despised him. His controversial comments about the Haiti earthquake in January 2010, which claimed over 220,000 lives, outraged viewers and wrestlers alike. Backstage, Awesome Kong confronted Bubba, punching him twice in response to his insensitive remarks. Despite this, Bubba remained employed, while Kong eventually quit in protest. This incident was a clear indication of Hogan's influence over Dixie Carter. And Bubba wasn't the only one benefiting from Hogan's favoritism. As Hogan strutted to the ring during TNA's first live Impact episode, another of his controversial decisions loomed. Scott Hall was in the wings, and Sean Waltman were shown at ringside when Hogan started cutting his promo. Hall interrupted. "Now, when me and Puck heard that he was here, that Hulk Hogan was going to be here, and Big Kevin Nash has been here, that means one thing to us. Big paychecks, big sold-out arenas, and big parties." As we all started getting flashbacks to WCW and the inmates taking over the asylum, the Hulkster snapped us back into reality. He assured everyone that this time, things were going to be different. TNA was going to become the #1 company in the world. But we should have known better back then. You can never trust a word that comes out of Hogan's mouth. In fact, it was almost insulting how Hogan didn't even try to hide his nepotism. He had already brought in Bubba, Scott Hall, and Sean Waltman, but he still wasn't done for the evening. Bischoff showed up, someone who had no reason to be on TV as an executive producer. Everyone had just assumed he would work backstage for TNA, not as an on-screen personality. Hogan's nepotism became literal when they showed his own daughter, Brooke, sitting at ringside. To ruin everyone's night, the Nasty Boys made their TNA debut. These two overweight relics were barely relevant in the 90s, but they ended up on the gravy train too, just because they were Hogan's best friends. I'm surprised Brutus didn't show up somewhere. The special live episode of Impact drew a 1.5 rating, while Raw on the other side scored a 3.7. Still, TNA's performance was enough to convince Spike TV to allow Impact to go head-to-head with Raw on Monday nights starting in March 2010. Sadly, this wasn't Brooke Hogan's only appearance in TNA. She was announced as the head of the Knockouts division, a role she had absolutely no right to play. It was blatant nepotism on Hogan's part. But Hogan had an ulterior motive, getting his daughter on TV to promote her awful music career that no one cared about. Brooke was involved in a storyline with the Aces and Eights, where she played Bully Ray's love interest. Her acting was better in Hogan Knows Best, and that's not a compliment. The Aces and Eights was a biker faction inspired by the Sons of Anarchy TV show. It was one of Eric Bischoff's attempts to copy the NWO in WCW. Initially, it seemed promising. Fans were intrigued by the hidden identities of the members and surprised by the reveals, but the novelty wore off. Each reveal became more disappointing than the last.